Morning, everybody. Today is class 3 of CAD 212. Sorry about last week. I had internet issues. I had to cancel class, but it seems like it was rather fortuitous because we had 5 new people join the class. So I don't know if anyone is that really joined the class is here today. If so, can you say hi? All right, looks like you've got all the original cast. So yeah, we had a ton of new people join late, so it's actually kind of fortuitous besides the fact that they're not here in class today. So new people, if you are watching this video, which you should be, please contact me directly and let me know your status and what's going on so we can touch base and get you caught up. There are mods on Canvas now that are live. The first mod is there to be turned in, so please get that turned in as soon as possible. And then for everybody, since we had some new people come in, we've changed things a little bit, and I've given you an extra couple of days to get your assignment turned in for your floor plan. Just think of it as that you're ahead of the game now, but if you do have it done, please turn that in, and it's going to be due Wednesday morning so you can get that done. And new people, do go back and watch the video to explain what we're looking for that assignment for your floor plans. All right, any questions about the previous work that we've done, y'all? Okay, cool. So we're actually going to be getting into a little bit more information today. We're going to talk about intro to Revit. What is BIM? You'll hear that word thrown about a lot. We're going to go over the graphic user interface for Revit, and then we're going to talk about walls and how to create walls. We'll start drawing our walls, how to build them, things like that, get them laid out. And then we'll talk about temporary dimensions and constraints and how we constrain our walls to the exact size that we need. What's good about this is I'm going to give you a week to get the entire floor plan completed. So on Wednesday, we'll come back and we'll talk about some other stuff, how to add doors and windows and things like that, and do some more information on walls. It's like a 2-part lecture. So we'll have that on Wednesday. And then your entire floor plan sketch in Revit will be due a week from today. So let's jump into that. So what you're going to see a lot is Revit referred to as BIM, or you may hear, do you know BIM? And BIM is basically building information modeling, obviously BIM for short. It is an intelligent 3D model-based process that gives architecture, engineering, and construction professionals the insight and tools to more effectively plan, design, construct, and manage buildings and infrastructure. So what does that mean? Basically, when we're drawing this model, we're going to be drawing it 3D. We'll be drawing it in 2-dimensional to start the process. And as you can see, when you draw one line that is supposed to be a wall, when we switch that to a 3D aspect, you're not just going to have one flat 2-dimensional, you're going to have an entire wall there. So it's a way that we can incorporate a lot of information into the process, how we can create the type of wall that we want, the thickness of the wall, what the wall is made out of, and it just is a way to more quickly build and more efficiently build a model in CAD as opposed to a 2-dimensional way that we did it with just regular AutoCAD. Then you can also take a lot of the information that you've input into it as you've designed it and pull that information out to analyze the building. And that's where we get our schedules and things from. And there's just really in this class, we kind of scratch the surface of what Revit does. But that's basically what BIM is, building information modeling. We're creating a model with a ton of information that you can extract to it to make it easier for you as you progress through your planning. So remember that for when you for down the line. Let's move on to graphic user interface next. That's going to be in Canvas under your files. That should be live. Let me double check on that. And it should be loaded under Spring 2022 for y'all under Documents. And let me close this. Yeah, it's set under Revit User Interface, and you should have access to it. Now I'm going to go ahead and open that up. This will be what we're reviewing today. I'm going to open it up in a different file. And then you can also follow along within Revit if you want to. I'll just pull that up at the same time so you can see like the full Revit screen. As you can see from the get-go, it's a lot different than AutoCAD. It's a lot more powerful. And once you get the hang of it, most people like this a lot more than regular AutoCAD. All right, so let's jump into the screen. All right. So top right here, this is a little old, and I know some of you are, some of you new people, I need you to make sure that you're downloading Revit 2020 from Autodesk. We're all working in 2020. Long explanation from previous video, but just make sure that you're using 2020. This one's a little, I need to update this a little bit, but that's okay. So application menu is in our file. We're not going to use this too much. This is where you can start a new project, open another project, save as, print, and then in our more advanced Revit applications, we use this options bar over here. There's other things that we can do over here. We'll kind of touch base on most of these a little later on in class, but know that our options are right there. So application menu. This bar right here, notice in this image, I have the quick access toolbar set up here on this line. And then I also have it here on this line. So quick access toolbar is just that. It's tools that are used frequent and often, and it's just a quicker way to get to them that you'll end up using a lot. You can change the location of it. I like it located here. And this one, here you can flip it back and it's more in line with this one right here. The difference is between having it located up here is, since this is your Revit, you can add more tools to it, and you only have a certain amount of space right here to actually put, fit in all your tools. So if you actually put it below, show below the ribbon, you actually have a lot more space to add more quick access tools if you're going to be using them. A couple of quick access tools that we use real quickly are this 3D. If I say go to little doghouse, it's this. That's what, but it's this 3D view, and then that's probably one I use the most. And then there's also text, and then align for dimensions. And I use this tool a lot too. So you can just kind of click on each one of those and see which one. Don't click on it, just kind of hover over it, and then you can see. And then obviously that's print. And then we can add some more as we go along. Another one that's going to be used a lot, and we'll talk about this later, is switch windows and close inactive windows. So a few of these are used throughout class, and as we go through class, we'll explain that how those are used a little bit more. And then this one too, thin lines or thick lines. I'll talk about that later. All right. So the ribbon. This is the main thing that really kind of runs Revit. It's made up of, the ribbon is made up of tabs, and then our individual tools and panels. So what does that mean? So this is the entire ribbon right here. On the ribbon, we have architecture tab, structure tab, steel, masking and site view, etc. So what I will be doing, especially at the start of this, I'll be telling you to go to the architecture tab, and you can see it's broken down into different panels. So then I could tell you to go to the build panel, and then these individual components within that are tools. So how we start out a drawing is we go to the architecture tab, build panel, and then the wall tool. Within the wall tool, if you do a drop down, you notice we have other types of walls that are in here. Wall by face, wall by structure. We're going to use the default of wall architectural throughout this entire process. As you can see, there's some other ones that also have a little caret drop down that have different ways that we can do stuff, and we'll be learning these along the way. But just to start, to default for everything, when we use the wall tool, it's just going to be this default wall right here. Now, once again, if we're going to be doing annotations, I'll go to the annotate tab, go to the dimensions panel, and go to the align tool. So it's just a way to help organize, and hopefully a way to help you kind of work through it as we start talking about it in class. So that kind of covers quick access toolbar, ribbons. Oh, here you have a ribbon in a contextual tab. Notice how that is green right there. So that means that when we click on a tool, we will get this green panel over here that gives us more context for what the specific tool is we're using. So within that tool, we have these other ways that we can change the particular tool, make it just kind of work with it and make it change things to make it work a little bit better for us. And as we go into how to draw walls, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but notice that when you click on some tools, you do have this additional information available that you can adjust, and we'll go through that as needed. And then notice that I've still got this hanging out here. This little crosshairs is still there. If I want to make that go away, I can just click on this modify tab, and that will stop any tool that you're using. It'll like end it. Like if I was drawing a wall, there's certain ways that if you hit exit, escape, you can close it, or you can just hit this modify button. It gets a little confusing because I use modify a lot. So there's modify button here, modify tab, and then there's also a modify panel. So we try and be as clear about that. But if you want to just stop a tool that's in use, then you just hit this modify button, and that will change that. And all this will start making more sense as you start working with everything in class. All right. Options bar. All right, actually, these two sections right here are very important. You want to make sure these are always open. Whenever you're doing a project, inevitably somebody's going to close one, but that's okay. We'll show you how to get them back. But these are really the kind of the drivers of the project. So properties, much like in CAD, is obviously the properties associated with whatever tool you're using. Notice how it just says this is the floor plan right now. And if I click that to wall, now it becomes a wall properties. This section above all this stuff right here is called the type selector. And that means that there's a bunch of different types of walls that are already loaded into this project, and we can create our own. So all the ones that are already loaded in here, if you drop on it, you click on the type selector, these are all the walls that are already loaded into this wall tool. So if I say go to the type selector and find a generic 6-inch wall, then you can follow those instructions just by going to this type selector. So we'll be using this a lot. And then when you start creating your own walls, you'll notice that those will be dropped in and saved in here as well. Notice everything is alphabetical, E's, F's, G's. Reason I draw that to your attention is when we create our walls It's sometimes easier to keep everything grouped together so we're not having to hunt through and look for stuff. So what I typically do in my naming nomenclature is I'll start all of my stuff with like a wall, obviously, because I'm creating a wall. And that way I just know I have to go to like wall and then find the other information for it. But think about how you're naming stuff and it just makes things easier for you to find it later on. So basically this is the options, our type selector, and then below that is our properties palette. This drives a lot of stuff. Notice through here we've got our location line, we've got a top constraint, we've got unconnected, up to level. There's tons of stuff in here that we can adjust to change what that wall looks like, and we will learn how to do that too. In my project browser, this is what drives the project as well. It helps organize the project. What I want you to take note of is what this looks like here. We have floor plan and we have level 1 and we've got all this stuff right here. Well, Revit is broken down into many different disciplines. So we have structure, and then we have MEP class and things like that. So all that is driven by what type of template that you choose. So when I opened this project, I did not pay attention to what template I chose. So if I wanted to pick the right one, I would go back to New, Project, and I just hit Construction Template. This is what a construction template looks like. We're always going to be using architectural template. So when you open a project, make sure you hit architectural template and watch the difference between the two. This is what an architectural template looks like. A lot less information on there. If I switch back and this tab right here, back to the other project. If you ever see anything that looks like this, you know you're in the wrong template and you have to always work in architectural template. If you start working in something like this, it's going to make you crazy because there's a lot of stuff in here that is not going to be associated with the work that we'll be doing. So that's a big one there. Make sure you always start in an architectural template. All right, so type selector properties, the one below it, project browser. How the project browser is organized is different. You saw that, how that changed when we went from there to there. And everything's kind of driven through here. So if we're drawing our floor plan, obviously we're going to start on floor plan level 1. If we have our level 1 done, then we could go to level 2, and then we have site plan. Also, we have our elevations and our ceiling plans. And the more we start adding stuff, notice we'll have legends, schedules, sheets. We'll have 3D views as those progress. But notice how when we add a new view, it automatically populates that in here.
I'm sorry, I had a question.
Sure.
For when you say new project, template file, architectural template, it has a choice of create new project or project template. Which of those two options?
Oh, good question. Definitely always project template because you're not going to be creating a new one right now. So yeah, you mean like here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we're always going to be using the default go to project.
Okay.
Just that default. This one would be if you wanted to create a new project template. Like if you went and like a lot of firms will create their own project template, so it does exactly what they want it to do, but we're not going to create that for now. We're just going to use the default in Revit. Okay. So project browser kind of drives everything. We'll play with that a little bit later today. View control bar is one that you're going to be using a lot. If we look down on the ribbon right here, so this is the view control bar. A couple of things that we're going to be looking at that is, first off, we're going to be looking at this. Anything drawn, so that's why this this shows us if we want a coarse, medium, or fine type of drawing. As we draw the walls, I'll show you how those develop there. This is another big one that you'll hear me use a lot, is visual styles. There's different ways that we can see our drawing, and as we get their walls up, we'll do that. The next big one we use is temporary hide isolate. We'll talk about that later. And then we'll use this little reveal heading elements as well. But the ones that you'll most likely be using right now are going to be visual styles, and then also temporary hide, isolate. So we'll be using those guys a lot. And then the next big one is really the context menu. And that's a way that we can do additional stuff and change other things up. And we'll get to that when we need to. So that's pretty much it. So the big drivers that you need to remember ahead of time are, tab, panel, and tools, how to navigate through that, how to keep the properties and project, how to use the properties and project browsers. If you do accidentally close one, because they're real easy to close, it's going to happen. If you just do that, it's going to disappear. So you can go to the View tab, all the way to the right to the User Interface tool. And if you click on that, here you can find your, oops, there we are, properties again, and that'll add your properties back in. You can also right click and it can make sure that your properties are there too. But say if you close the project browser, right click, you're not going to find project browser here, but you will find project browser on the user interface. Any questions about the graphic user interface? It's a lot of information, but as you go through it, it's going to start making more sense and you'll catch on really quickly. Let's talk about walls. Walls is where we really start creating our walls, our project period. It's going to be starting with drawing our walls. There's a bunch of different wall types that are already loaded into Revit, as we've already seen. So if you go to Architecture tab, Build Panel Wall Tool, we'll do that drop down again. And then we'll go to the Type Selector. These are a ton of walls that are already in Revit, that are preloaded into Revit, broken down to exterior, generic, and interior. You can also create your own walls. So just as a quick project right now, quick lesson right now, I'm just going to click on one of these guys and kind of play with it and kind of show you some information. And then we're going to learn how to create our own walls. And those are actually the walls we're going to be using for your project. So let me just pick one of these. I'm going to pick exterior brick on CMU. And CMU is concrete masonry unit. So notice when I have this active and I come back up here to this options, if we take a look at a couple of these things, what they look at, we're not going to mess with them too much, but they're good to know. So on here, it's going to measure from your height. So it's going to go up. You can also pick an option for depth to go down, but obviously we're going to make that to go height. It can be unconnected, level 2. This is ways we can adjust the height of it. And it gets a little confusing for some people, but as we go along with it, it'll start making more sense. But basically, these walls are going to come in with certain dimensions. And this one is set to unconnected, so it's not going to stop at a level, but they've got it set to 20 feet. So we can change that as well. Another big one is the location line. As you start drawing these walls out, notice I have that center location line. That dashed line is the location line. So when it says location line, wall center line, that's what it means. Notice this check mark is for the chain is checked. So that means every time I stop, that's going to end the wall, but I can continue drawing after that. If I uncheck chain, after I draw the next one, I get a break. And it's not going to be continuous. So sometimes you want to use that, sometimes you won't. I prefer to leave it on. because if I'm drawing and I want to stop it, I can just hit escape once. Notice it stops drawing that wall, and now I still have my tool active, and then I can continue drawing that wall like that. So if I want to get out of this tool, I want to end it, I just hit escape twice, and then it'll stop it. The last wall I use will be the one that defaults into my type selector. And then if I just want to stop the tool altogether, I can hit my modify button and that'll end it as well. So if you want to end the process that it's doing, you can just click on escape once and then continue after. Or if you want to end it altogether, you can just hit the type selector or hit escape twice. So let's go back to wall. All right, that pretty much covers what we need to do with this. There's other stuff that there's available, but we're just going to leave it as that for now. Just drawing some quick walls. Close that tool again. Let's go down to the bottom and let's click on our detail level. Notice how this is just a hollow looking wall right now. And if I go to my detail level, I can go to medium, or I can go to fine. And that'll give you more detail with inside that wall, how this wall is actually made up, how it's composed, and things like that. I don't necessarily recommend using this one right away. It's just easier to start with, to use your course, so it doesn't get all those lines don't get confused. But when we're doing floor plans and putting them on pages and stuff, a lot of times we'll want to use that fine just to make sure that we have all the breakdown of how the wall is created, depending on how complex the wall is. Let's see, let me put that back to course. Another thing on here that you can kind of play with a little bit, this button right here is thin lines or thick lines. So let's click on that and see what happens. So obviously pretty straightforward. The walls are much thicker here. This doesn't make your wall itself thicker, it's just the view, what we're looking at it. Because sometimes if you defaulted to a thick line, sometimes it gets a bit much, especially when they get more complicated. So if we go back to thin lines, sometimes people find it easier to draw in this. So that's just a matter of choice. Okay. So we've got all these random walls laid out and stuff. So let's see what they look like in 3D. So let's jump to 3D right here on our quick access toolbar. We'll just jump there, and we've already got a bunch of walls up, which is pretty nice because, you know, in CAD we have to do a whole other drawing. So basically you draw a bunch of lines and, you know, you're good. Notice in here, as we're in 3D, we've got our different levels. So we've got level 1 and it defaults to level 2. So we've got 10 feet here. We'll learn how to add more levels later on, but the wall is set to 20 feet. So that's why it's up here. We can change the level of our walls by clicking on a wall, making it active. So it's just this one particular wall. I'd have to select all walls if I wanted to do them all at the same time. But say I just wanted this one wall to change to 10 feet. So I come over here to my properties, I come down to unconnected, and I'm going to change that to 10 feet. So just type 10 and enter. What's nice about Revit is that you can just do, like, if I wanted that to be like 100 feet, 2 inches, I don't have to worry about, you know, doing all the symbols all the time. So if I wanted to change that back to like 12 foot 6 inches, I could do 12 space 6. And it'll know to put it at 12 foot 6 inches. So it's another little shortcut for you. There's other ways that we can constrain stuff. If I actually just wanted this wall to come up to level 2 and not have that flexibility to move a lot, I can constrain it to level 2. So on this one, I'm going to click this wall. Notice how it says top constraint is unconnected. When it's unconnected, that's when I can set it to any height that I want. But if I want it to be stuck on level 2, just to go up to level 2, now I'm going to up to level 2. and apply. And now this is set as a 10-foot wall. It's constrained to level 2. You can still move it like this, but its constraint is like this. So if I went back now, clicked on it here, notice if I wanted to change the height, I wouldn't be able to change the height. One of the dangers of anything in Revit is if we don't lock things in place and we'll learn how to lock stuff in place, you're going to have issues where you can move stuff like that. So be careful with that as you're drawing. A lot of times that people catch that by accident and move that, but we'll show you how to fix that later. Okay, so if I wanted to change this back to 20 feet, I'm going to click on here. I'm going to have to unconstrain it. So I'm going to make it unconnected. And now notice I can change the feet. I'll just change that back to 20. And now everything's at 20 feet. When you're doing your walls initially, and they come out to 20 feet when you create them, leave them at 20 feet. Don't change them to 10 feet or anything like that. Leave them at 20 feet because it's part of the process. I kind of show you how to work things. So you don't have to change your walls when you're creating it. We'll come back and then we'll add the roof to our 20-foot wall, and then we can show you a different way to connect the walls to the roof. So you do not have to change the height of the walls as you're drawing your initial walls. All right, another thing. Okay, so we're going to go from here to our visual styles. It's set to hidden lines. Now watch when we hit it to consistent color. We've got our brick on one side and our chipboard on the other side. If we do shaded, obviously now we have them in the shade. And then realistic. So if we zoom in on this a little bit, you can see we start getting a realistic look, closer to what it's going to look like when we actually render it. But it's still in the shade. What I definitely recommend people to do, it's always easier to draw in consistent color for now, because you're going to have that color contrast, but the shade isn't going to get in the way. And the bigger these drawings get, the longer they take to populate. So if you have them in realistic, it'll take even longer. Any questions so far, y'all? Okay, cool. Anytime you got a question, just say. All right, let's get back to level 1. I'm going to get rid of all these walls. I'm going to hit delete. One thing that I didn't point out before that I want to make sure that you do are these little guys right here. These are elevation tags. Actually, let me undo what I just did. These are elevation tags, elevation markers. So they're going to be associated with these elevations over here. So if I click on just the tip of this one, it's going to bring me to my north elevation, and that's what my north elevation looks like. And my north elevation, I can change that to consistent color to see what that looks like. And that's just my true view. So you never want to delete these guys right here. We can move them, and we can, when we move them, we want to move them back in their own direction if to make more space. If I needed more space to come out over here, you know, I could move this guy like this way, which is fine. But you never want to actually delete them. We can get them back, but you know, there's other complications involved with that. So we'll get to that if anybody does delete it. Just don't delete those for now, or ever. So let's go to another view. Like we just clicked on this one. Here we have our east view, all associated with it. One of the things you're really going to like about Revit is when you draw something in one view, obviously floor plan, it's going to show up in another view, which is really nice. So it does populate itself throughout the entire model. So if we added a roof on here in our floor plans, then, you know, when we came to our elevations, it would also show in our elevations. As you notice that we've added a 3D view in here. 3D view is now populated in our project browser. If we click on that and open it up, we can access our 3D view from here as well. So lots of different ways that we can navigate through it. As we're in this 3D view, notice that we have this navigational cube right here. I definitely recommend getting used to this navigational cube. You're going to end up using it a lot as we progress through. It's pretty easy to use, and yeah, so obviously if you click on top, you're going to have that top view. You can click on sections of the cube to get different views. If you get confused about where the orientation of your project is, and you're like, I'm not sure how to get back to start, click on this little house right here, and that'll bring you right back to your original view. You can also click on it and move it, click and hold, and you can move it any which way you want, like that. And I just recommend as you're going through, starting to use it, just kind of play with it. You'll hear me say that a lot. And I'll click on home and just bring you back here. But that's the best way to really kind of get used to this, is just to get in there, use it, and fiddle around with it. And it is kind of plain. So before you actually start drawing your real floor plan, I suggest just go in and kind of fiddle around with this and see how it works. Review some of the stuff that we've gone over today. Let's see what we've got next. There's a lot to go over. All right, so I'm gonna delete all these guys again. And for our project itself, for everyone's projects, we're going to be using set external walls and internal walls. Everybody's going to be creating walls that are 5.5 inches thick for your external walls, and then internal walls are all going to be 4.5 inches thick. And the reason I do that is because there's no way for me to know or verify if how thick your exterior walls are. And it's just an easy way to keep things uniform, for me to help you grade it, and for everybody to kind of be on the same page, and for not to get too confusing for y'all. So when we create our walls, just remember that you're going to create your external walls at 5.5 inches and your internal walls at 4.5 inches. And we'll go ahead and learn how to create those today. So Architecture tab, Build Panel Wall Tool. Actually, I'm going to go back to this basic wall exterior brick for one more moment to kind of show you something. So when you're drawing your walls, when you're going along and following along with your floor plan, you always want to try and do it in a clockwise motion. So if I do it in a clockwise motion over here, and let me turn this on consistent color. Notice the way my walls are laying out. I've got the brick on the outside. When I do a clockwise motion. If I did this counterclockwise, the brick's going to be on the wrong side. So inevitably, when you start drawing this, you're going to get caught up and have your walls inside out. But Revit has an easy way to solve that. So you can just click on that wall. Notice these toggles. These toggles are on the inside of the wall. So I know this wall is backwards. So now if I flip them, the walls are arranged the correct way. If I click on this one, all these toggles are going to be on the outside. So I know that the walls are facing the right direction, even if I didn't have the color on. So even if I didn't have any color on, if I click on the walls, Okay, these toggles are outside. I know they're correct. That's these. All right, I need to flip this one, and this one. So now after we do that and we jump to 3D, we've got both of them that are laid out the correct way. So you're going to do a lot of things drawing in 2D, jumping to 3D just to make sure it looks right. There may be times that you need to adjust stuff and you don't catch it in 2D in 2D, then you'll go to 3D just to make sure it looks right. Just the process, but the more you do it, the more you'll get it. Okay. Let's talk about how to create our own walls. So we're going to go to Architecture tab, Build Panel Wall Tool. We're going to do the drop down here. What I do is I always recommend you to start with a generic. Anything new, any new material or anything new that we create, we always want to start with a generic. If you try to build a new wall from or new component from anything else, you'd have so much stuff to have to deal with. So it's always easier to start with a generic. So here we're going to start with a generic 8-inch. I'll click on that. Here we're going to go into edit type. And the first thing you have to do is duplicate and rename it. So here I'm going to take wall exterior 5.5 inches, and then put your initials behind it, so I know that you created that. Depending on what firm you work for, they'll have their own nomenclature in place, so you can just follow what they want. But here we're going to have everything listed under wall, and then interior, exterior. If we have additional walls, that way we know they're all easy to find. And we'll just hit OK. So now we still have that original generic 8-inch available to us, and now I've created a new wall from that. And now we can change that information. From here, we're going to go to our structure, and we're going to go to edit. And this is where we really create the wall, the way the wall is made. So basically, this is just right now an 8-inch thick structural wall. But if we're creating a wall for the exterior of our house, we know that there's exterior siding, and on the inside of that is going to be gypboard. So we need to add 2 more materials at least. Usually it's, as you saw the other one, it's going to be a much thicker wall. But the minimum wall that we're going to create right now, since this isn't a structural class, is just our a regular wall with 3 materials. So we just have 1 material right now. This is material is structural. It's located between the core boundary. What is the core boundary? Core boundary is just a way that Revit discerns what is structural material, what isn't. So just anything within the core boundary is going to be structural. If we add new materials, then we go down here to insert. So we're going to insert 2 more materials. Notice they jump in between the core boundary as well. Well, here we can move them. We want to move them outside the core boundary. This one's highlighted here. So here I'm going to move this up outside the core boundary. This one I'm going to move down outside the core boundary. So we have this nice layer cake effect. Next thing I want to change is the thickness. Notice how it defaults to 8 inches, and we've got 0 here. Well, it's not going to let you leave anything besides the core boundary at 0. So we know that for our actual structural lumber, here we're going to use a 5-inch piece of lumber, which will be actually 4.5 inches thick. And then for our exterior siding, we're just going to make that 1/2 inch. And then make that 1/2 inch as well for our gypboard. And notice how it changed the total thickness up here to 5.5 inches. If I change that to 1 inch, if I change that to a foot, say, by accident, now our total thickness is 1 foot 5 inches. this has happened in the past where people haven't caught that, and we've had very thick walls that look like they're building a castle. So make sure that you double check to make sure you have the right thickness of your walls. So 0.5 inches and 5.5 inch thick walls. So after we change the thickness and we have that set, we want to change the function of these walls. So we want to leave what's between the core boundary as structure, and we want to change the function of these other two walls. So since they're both finish walls, but this is a finish wall on the exterior side, there's exterior right here, interior side right here, this is the point that's exterior. We're going to change that to finish layer 1. Anything on the exterior side is always finish layer 1. Anything on the interior side is always finish layer 2. This gets a bit confusing when we're drawing internal walls, because it's, even though you're creating an internal wall, it's going to say exterior side here. You just need to know that since it's an interior wall, you're going to create that as finish level 2. This is a way that Revit organizes the information, that BIM information, to keep things straight as it's processing, just keeping all your materials straight, how it's organized. So we know this is exterior side, exterior wall, finish layer 1. So now we can go in and we can change the materials of all of these guys. So let's do the structural material first. So we'll jump in, click on here. You get these little 3 dots right here. Click on that. And this is where things start getting a little bit more interesting, where you can change stuff. These are all the materials that are already loaded into this project. We'll learn how to create our own materials a little in next class, but we're just going to use the materials that are in place now for these things that we're looking at right now. So for structural, you obviously want to use wood. So we have structure, you have steel bar joist, structure wood here. You can use these, but what I kind of like to do is, obviously I like to just use softwood lumber on here. Obviously you don't want to create your house out of softwood lumber, but it's just easier for you to visualize it rather than the ones, because it's going to look like that as opposed to something like this. So just use this material as a default to create the house. Another thing you want to do is always under your graphics tab here, click on use render appearance. And then if we click on the appearance tab, this is actually what the image is going to look like once it's rendered. So use render appearance, all that done, and then we'll hit OK. So now that material is changed to softwood lumber. For my finish layer 2 on my interior side, that's obviously going to be chipboard. So I'll click on that. I'll find chipboard in here. Say I couldn't find it. If I want to do a search here, chip. There's my gypsum wallboard. I'll click on that. Click on use render appearance and hit OK. So now I've got my gyp wallboard for my interiors. And now for my material on the outside for siding, let's see what we've got available. We just scroll through here and see what we've got. All right, we've got some brick here. Let's use the brick. So everybody's going to start out with brick. If you start doing it now, we'll learn how to change materials and create your own materials next class. But for now, we'll just kind of default to brick. And click on use render appearance, and I'll hit OK. So now we've changed our function to what it's supposed to be. We've changed all our materials, and we've created the correct thickness of our walls. Let's hit this preview button and see what that means. So this is what we've created. So you can see that everything's associated with the level. And then if we change this here, this is obviously a plan view, top-down view. If we wanted a section view, we have something that looks like this. associated with all our different levels here. So now we created that wall. We're going to hit OK again. And hit OK again. And now in our type selector, we have the wall that we just created. Now here I can start just kind of drawing this out. Say I wanted to draw like a 10-foot wall. I just wanted to draw a rectangular building. Notice we have location lines that pop up that help you guide you to where that endpoint would be. So you don't have to draw here. You can catch that endpoint and draw that up and connect that properly. So say this is supposed to be a 10 by 20 foot building, but I just randomly drew this size or anything. So there's things I can do without changing, without having to redraw this to make this the size that I want. So if I want this wall to be smaller, I'll click on this wall. It's going to move both of them at the same time. So it's set to 40 feet on this temporary dimension. This is called a temporary dimension, and it helps you set the width and the height and the length of all your walls. So here, if we take a look at where this dimension line lies, it's lying in the center of this wall. So you have to pay close attention to where your dimensions are coming from when you see them on your drawing and where they're going to start and stop, because this is where a lot of people get confused. So if you measured from your exterior wall to your exterior wall, you want to make sure that those dimensions are set from exterior wall to exterior wall. Because obviously if you measured from your exterior wall and it's 40 feet, this is not going to be correct. So we want to change where that dimension line starts. So let's click on this little node right here and notice how that changes location. You just click on it and it cycles through those 3 different location lines and say this is from your exterior wall to your exterior wall. Now those dimension lines, temporary dimension lines, are set in the right place. And notice how your entire building would have been off 5.5 inches if we did not change that. So you want to pay close attention to where dimensions start and stop and how they're set up when you're looking at a set of plans and how you're drawing things out. When you did your measurements, you did them from the interior walls. So you would set that as an interior measurement. So now it's set to interior to interior. Once again, that's off 5.5 inches. So let's change this to 40 feet. Oh, and I said 10 feet, didn't I? Let's make it 12 foot 2 inches. So now that interior wall is set to 12 foot 2 inches. And what's nice about Revit is that you can lock things in place. You don't have to at first, but I recommend doing it just as practice as you go through. How I would lock this in place and constrain it in place is I would click on this temporary dimension symbol. And then I would click on the dimension itself. When you do that, you get this little lock that's in place. And then you can click on the lock. And now that's not going to move. Notice that moves the whole thing. Now I can unlock it and move it then. If I want to keep it in place, I'll leave it as locked. And since these are temporary dimensions, I no longer need this dimension to be here. It's just going to muddy up my drawing as I keep going through it. So I'll highlight that and I'm going to delete it. And it's going to give you this warning. It says a dimension that has lock constraints is being deleted, but the element will still be constrained. So it's not going to delete the constraint. It's just going to delete the measurement. So it's going to, if you want to unconstrain it, then you can hit unconstrain, but we basically just want to hit OK because we still want that constraint in place. We can unconstrain it later if we need to, but we don't want that temporary dimension there. So we're going to do the same thing with these walls. So this wall I want to be shorter. These two walls I want to bring down to like 15 feet. So I'll click on either one of these walls. So if I click on this one, I get the measurement here. If I click on this one, I get the measurement here. It does get a bit frustrating for people just being able to pick the correct wall in order to get it to move to the one you want. Once again, it's practice and just kind of, play with it, and then it'll start making more sense. So here I'm going to change the dimension. Doesn't matter which side I do it from here because it's just a regular square rectangular building. If I want to change the dimension, I click on the dimension there. Let's make this 15 foot 7 inches, 15 space 7. And notice this wall moved up. That is a big difference when you're looking at stuff. So since I made this wall active, this is the wall that's going to move. Let's undo that. If I made this wall active, this wall will move and this one will move down. Click here, 15 space 7. So that's another reason you want to pay attention to which wall is going to move and which one doesn't. Once again, just practice. So I set that at 15 space 7. But if you notice, I did not pick my dimension where it starts or stops. So this is off. This would be considered wrong. You want to make sure that you change those dimensions to the interior dimension. And now let's make this 15.7 again. And now we have true dimensions. Once again, let's lock this in place. Let's go ahead and click on the symbol, click on the dimension line, and then lock that in place. Let's delete that. We don't need that. We know that's still going to be constrained. So we have all of our walls set in place. Let's do, let's jump to 3D. See our nice little building right there. Let's do the internal wall, create that, and then do temporary dimensions with that. We'll do one more example of that, and that'll be class for today, and we'll open the floor to any questions. So let's go back and do internal walls. In order to do that, I don't want to do that in 3D. I'm going to go back to level 1, floor plan level 1. Sometimes people get confused and they'll click ceiling plan level 1, and you'll be like, the more you go through this, the more confusing it'll get. So don't draw walls and ceiling level 1. Say if we did that, let's see what would happen. Let's go to 3D. So it is going to work, but you want to make sure that as you continue through, you make sure you're drawing everything where it's supposed to be, because there's going to be some tools that you try to draw in ceiling level that are just not going to work as we go through it. So sometimes you'll see things work in different levels, but it's really good to kind of make sure that you work in a correct level every time. So now let's go back to level 1. And I'm just going to highlight that one and delete it. So now I'm going to create a new wall. Architecture tab, build panel wall tool. And I don't want to start with the wall I just built. It does default to that. I want to go back and always start with that generic 8-inch, not filled, not masonry, just generic 8-inch. Now I'm going to do edit type again. Notice what the wall looks like here. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to rename it. And now this is going to be wall interior 4.5 inches. And my initials. Hit OK. Notice we still just have our structural material in here. We're going to add 2 more materials, one exterior and one interior. But since this is an interior wall on both sides of this wall, it's going to be chipboard. So I'm going to insert 2 more materials. I'm going to move this one up outside the core boundary. I'm going to move this one down outside the core boundary. Now I'm going to change the thickness. If we're using a 2x4, the actual measurement of a 2x4 is 1.5 by 3.5. So I'll make this 3.5 inches. Notice how that's changing up here. It says 11.5 inches for the full thickness of this wall. I'm going to change this to 0.5 inch. Change the thickness of that wall. Now I'm going to change the function, obviously between the core boundary, always structure. Even though this says exterior side, it's an interior wall, so I know this is going to be finish layer 2. And this one will be finish layer 2 as well. Let's jump into our structural category and just use the softwood lumber for that. Whoops, I clicked too fast. This one does have user under appearance on it. A lot of times if you use it in one type of wall, it'll kind of default and kind of carry over. So it's still user under appearance on that, so we're good to go. And we need to make both of these materials gypsum wall board as well. Gypsum wall board, check mark, carry it over, so we're good. And then the same thing for this one. And then gypsum wall board as well, and hit OK. And OK. And OK. So we created our interior wall. Now let's go ahead and put in a couple of interior walls. So I'm going to click here. I just kind of randomly stuck that in there. So if we click on that again, we can see where we can actually make our correct dimensions. So I need to change my location line and my dimensions. So this is going to be from the interior wall to my interior wall. This is actually supposed to be 7 feet 2 inches. So 7 space 2. Oops. 7. Let's go. Oh, I forgot my number lock. 7 space 2. If I want to lock that in place, remember, click on the temporary dimension symbol, click on the dimension itself, and lock that into place. We'll delete that. So that's pretty much how we start laying out our building. Any questions about what we went over today, y'all? A lot of information to kind of play with and work through. So I definitely keep practicing with that. Good news is you're going to have a little bit more time. I need to make sure that the new people get caught up with stuff. So what I would suggest for you today, especially if you've already done your floor plan, is just use today to kind of practice drawing it. See if you can work it out. It's not going to, the completed drawn floor plan is not going to be due until next Monday. So you have a week to do that too, which is nice. And then when we come back on Wednesday, we're going to talk about walls a little bit more. Make sure everybody's comfortable with that. And we'll talk about creating materials. And then we'll also talk about windows, how to add windows and doors. So for now, if you want to try and shoot to get your complete floor plan done with just the walls, you can do that. But it's not going to be done. It's going to take, I like to give you a couple of days to just kind of play with this and kind of figure it out. Just because it does take a while to orient yourself with the way Revit gets laid out and stuff. But that's it for lecture today. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes. How did you access the temporary dimensions?
Oh, you just click on, so when I clicked on this one, this is the temporary dimension that I had in place before. And if I click on up here, this temporary dimension pops up. So depending on which wall you want to move to what dimension size, it depends on which which wall you're selecting. So that's going to pop up again. Since some of these are locked in place already, it does get a bit confusing. So if I just drew another one. So let's do a little advanced thing now, since we can. When we're on walls, there's all these different ways that we can draw walls over here. If we go over to this panel right here, obviously we're just drawing a straight line right now. But if you wanted to draw like a rectangular wall, I use this just as a shortcut for stuff. So I'll just click on that. Then you can draw a quick wall like that, and you've got 4 walls at the same time. I don't like this too much because I just use this as a shortcut when I'm giving you examples, because it doesn't necessarily give you the freedom to kind of change things up as easily as it does over here. But say if I did want to change these temporary dimensions on this, you just click on the wall you want to move. So if I wanted to move this one up or down, I click on that. So if I change that to 10 foot, notice how that part moves down. If this is the wall I wanted to move up, and it depends on the certain situations about when you'd want to move it. This one gets a little complicated because it has a temporary dimension over here too, because it's attaching to this. So if I click on here, if I change that to 10 foot, it's going to move up this time, and it changed that dimension as well. This one is not necessarily one that we need, but it's going to default since it's there. And that's when we have a whole, when we get more complicated floor plans, starts to confuse a little people. So that's why I kind of give you the time to work through it. So if I wanted to make this wall smaller or larger, I would click on one of these guys on the side. Notice how this one's going to attach to here. But the only, even though it's attached to this one, the only measurement I'm concerned with is this one right here. So I just want to make sure that my dimensions are set to the right space for my internal walls, and then I can change that to say 12 feet. And then when I do that, it's going to move this way. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. It does get a little confusing and frustrating when you start with it, but just keep practicing and it'll start making sense. So you've got plenty of time to do that, to start kind of laying things out. And it's just kind of like creating a puzzle, making a puzzle and trying to figure out how things fit together. Yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge. And it's really the most important thing, because once you're setting your dimensions of your floor plan, that pretty much sets all the rest of it for your project. And a lot of the stuff that we just learned, how to create materials and how to duplicate and rename stuff, you're going to be using that for a lot of other tools throughout the project as well. So that's pretty much it for today. Nothing is due on Wednesday, but I definitely recommend using the time to kind of get in there and kind of fiddle with these walls and see if you can figure it out. And that way you can come back on Wednesday and see if you have any questions. Anything else, y'all?
Right. We talked about meeting after class because I've been having trouble downloading Revit. Are you just going to stay on the Zoom?
Yeah, we can do that. We'll get everybody else to drop and then we can talk about that. Has anybody else had any trouble downloading Revit? Okay, cool. All right. Everybody else can drop, and I will see y'all on Wednesday.
I did have one other question. So we created these the exterior and interior walls. Do we need to save this particular project, or is that going to be saved within Revit for any project?
You do need to save that. It's a good question. It's a project specific, so you would need to save this project. At this point, you would go to File, Save As, Project, and then just save your project where you want it to go. And then when you do that, it will save these walls, so it's just within your project. So if we drop down here, notice since we started with a W, both of our walls are next to each other. Instead of having to hunt through exterior and interior walls, we know that we are both W's, both go down to wall and are easy to find. But yeah, great question. These are project specific. So if you opened a new project and started a new project, you'd have to create new walls.
Okay, and what would you like us to name this project?
You can name it whatever you want. I don't have a nomenclature for that, so that's fine. Put your initials in the name though, so I can identify who's who. I'll send out a renaming. Just know, I'll send out something to rename it for Wednesday. If you wanted to start on it now, I'll send that out now. I don't have that yet.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay, cool. Y'all are good to go, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
y'all.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, Brad. Let me stop this recording.